Olivia Crane arrived at Rosemore Gardens on a crisp spring morning, carrying her toddler, Thomas, on her left hip. The condominium complex rose before her in neat, symmetrical rows of pale brick, windows gleaming as though polished daily. Rows of azalea bushes, trimmed to near perfection, lined the stone walkway leading to the main doors. A freshly painted sign reading, Rosemore Gardens, Welcome Home, seemed to beckon newcomers with its immaculate letters. Yet beneath the perfection, Olivia sensed a certain stiffness. She waved to two passers-by, one an older gentleman sipping coffee on his porch, the other a middle-aged woman peering from behind the lobby glass. The man offered a friendly hello, while the woman responded with a curt nod before disappearing inside. Thomas squirmed in Olivia's arms, curious about his new surroundings. At 1.5 years old, he was a bundle of energy, forever exploring any new space. When she stepped into the lobby, Olivia found it tastefully decorated with potted ferns, polished tile, and softly humming fluorescent lights. A building superintendent, Miguel, appeared and offered to help with her bags. She thanked him but declined, wanting to familiarize herself with her new space and see how Thomas would react. Thomas was sensitive to bright lights and strange noises, and Olivia worried about how he might cope in the building's elevator, which emitted a mechanical hum and harsh overhead glow. Fortunately, the ride to the first floor was quick. Olivia soothed Thomas by speaking softly and promised herself that she would find gentle solutions to help him feel comfortable here. That was her first clue that life at Rosemore Gardens might be more complicated than the serene facade suggested. She recalled something Miguel had told her during the tour. Ms. Arnett, one of our HOA members, is very thorough about rules. Olivia had dismissed the comment at the time, but now wondered how that thoroughness might affect her everyday life in the building. The morning after moving in, Olivia spent an hour drafting a simple introduction letter. She slipped copies into the mail slots of her immediate neighbors, hoping to build a friendly rapport. Her note read, "Hello from Unit 1D, the Crane family," followed by her contact details. She mentioned her toddler, Thomas, in passing, offering to help if anyone ever needed an extra hand. Most doors in the hallway displayed identical doormats, plain brown with black trim. One door, however, had a more elaborate mosaic-style mat, along with a small brass plate reading, B. Arnett, Karen, in cursive letters. Remembering the caretaker's earlier reference to Ms. Arnett, Olivia hesitated momentarily before sliding the note beneath the door. If Ms. Arnett was thorough, perhaps a polite introduction would earn at least some goodwill. Later that day, Olivia ventured to the lobby with Thomas. Knowing his sensitivity to the harsh fluorescent lighting, she placed a short strand of battery-operated string lights near the elevator's corner. The pastel bulbs cast a soft, comforting glow, and she secured them with removable hooks so as not to damage the wall. Thomas stared, entranced, touching the gentle lights with wide-eyed wonder. A cough interrupted the peaceful scene. Olivia turned to find a middle-aged woman with precise posture and an almost imperious air. She wore well-pressed slacks, a crisp blouse, and an expression hinting at mild disapproval. "Hello," Olivia said warmly. "I'm Olivia Crane from—" "Yes, the new resident in 1D, the woman cut in. "I'm Beatrice Arnett, but you can call me Karen. I'm the HOA vice president." Olivia swallowed. "Nice to meet you, Karen. I'm just trying to help my son feel more comfortable. He's easily overstimulated by bright lights." Karen glanced at Thomas, who was blinking back at her, then at the string lights. "Those are lights you've placed in a common area? They're small and battery-powered," Olivia explained quickly. "They don't cause any damage, and Ms. Carter, one of the board members, approved them before we moved in. Thomas's pediatrician says it helps calm him." Karen's brow furrowed. "I'm not familiar with that arrangement. Ms. Carter is no longer on the board. We have standards to maintain here at Rosemore Gardens, dear. We can't just allow any personal decorations to clutter the lobby." Olivia tried to stay calm. "I understand. I'd be happy to discuss it with the rest of the board if necessary." Karen pursed her lips. "That might be wise," she said, turning sharply on her heel and marching off. Her voice trailed after her as she left. Rules are rules. In the subsequent weeks, Olivia did her best to keep the lights unobtrusive. She only turned them on when Thomas seemed upset, and she moved them higher up, out of direct view. Yet she soon found a typed note slipped under her door. Notice of noncompliance. The decorative lighting in the lobby corner violates Rosemore Gardens' uniform aesthetic standards. Please remove them immediately. HOA Vice President B. Arnett. Reading it made Olivia's heart sink. She had documented medical reasons, plus prior approval. Why this sudden opposition? She reached out to Daniel, her husband, who was away for business. He reviewed her texts and replied, "We'll handle it together when I'm back. Don't worry." But worry she did. Karen's rigid approach and the official tone of the note left Olivia feeling as though she were already an unwelcome nuisance. Other neighbors started sharing their own stories about Karen's micromanagement. An older gentleman on her floor recalled how he'd once placed a tasteful bench outside his unit, only to find a friendly reminder from Karen that furniture in the hallway violated code. Another neighbor whispered that Karen had scolded a family for using chalk to draw hopscotch squares on the sidewalk in front of the building. One afternoon, a gentle elderly resident named Mrs. Liu commented on Olivia's lights, calling them magical little fireflies. She remarked that it helped her see in the dim lobby corners without turning on the overhead lights. Olivia began to realize that Karen's viewpoint was not shared by many. This knowledge brought solace, but also uncertainty about how to handle the conflict. A glimmer of hope arrived in the form of Vijay Patel, another HOA board member, who called Olivia one evening. He explained that he'd read her emails and the letter from Thomas's pediatrician, and he felt the board could meet to discuss a formal exemption. Grateful, Olivia and Daniel agreed to attend an upcoming meeting in the building's lounge. On a breezy Tuesday evening, they joined 4 board members around a rectangular table. Karen sat at one end, arms folded, expression impassive. Olivia presented Thomas's situation, the pediatrician's letter, and her willingness to follow guidelines to keep the lights discreet. 2 board members, Harriet Crenshaw and Vijay, voiced support for a possible exemption, noting that the building had made exceptions for medical equipment in the past. Karen, however, was unmoved. She spoke bluntly. "While I'm sympathetic to personal challenges, allowing random lights in our building lobby is a slippery slope. We mustn't undermine the community's uniform look." The board ended up proposing a 2-week trial period, during which Harriet and Vijay would gather feedback from residents. If the response was positive and there were no issues, the lights could remain. Though Karen remained visibly displeased, Olivia and Daniel felt guardedly optimistic, until 3 days later, when everything took a turn for the worse. That night, Olivia returned from buying groceries to find a heartbreaking scene in the lobby. The string lights had been smashed, their plastic bulbs cracked and scattered across the floor. Bits of wire were torn and lay twisted beneath the shards. Olivia knelt down, tears welling up. Who would do such a thing? As Olivia was collecting the remnants of the broken lights, another neighbor, Maya Torres, stepped off the elevator. She gasped when she saw the debris. "Oh, Olivia, I'm so sorry. Did you see who did this?" Olivia shook her head, voice trembling. "No, I just got here." Maya helped her gather the plastic shards, placing them gently into a grocery bag. Soon, Daniel and Thomas appeared, alerted by Olivia's frantic call. Thomas, still too young to understand the gravity of the situation, clung to his mother and whimpered at the sight of her upset expression. Word spread quickly. Other residents trickled in, shaking their heads in disbelief. Though no one had proof, Karen's name came up in hushed tones more than once. A few neighbors confided that they had witnessed Karen muttering about unapproved lights in the lobby just that morning. That evening, after Thomas went to bed, Olivia and Daniel slumped on their living room couch, sadness and anger gnawing at them. "This can't just be about rules," Olivia said quietly. "Someone did this out of spite." Daniel agreed. "We should replace the lights. And if they break them again, we'll keep replacing them until the board makes a final decision. This is our son's well-being on the line." Meanwhile, driven by both anger and compassion, several neighbors formed an informal text group. They shared anecdotes about Karen's rigidity and voiced support for Olivia. As the discussion evolved, they devised a daring idea. If Karen had destroyed one strand of lights, they would install many more. In secret, they collected funds and purchased battery-operated, motion-sensor fairy lights by the boxload. On a humid summer night, a small group of parents, led by Maya and a neighbor named Calvin, gathered in the parking lot. Their cars were filled with boxes of fairy lights. The plan was simple: split into teams, each responsible for installing lights on a specific floor. Because they were battery-operated and adhered with removable strips, the lights wouldn't damage the walls. Olivia and Daniel joined the group, feeling a thrilling mix of fear and excitement. Olivia held a box labeled Thomas's Lights, a gift from several neighbors who wanted to show solidarity. They slipped into the building through a side entrance just after midnight, when most residents, and hopefully Karen, were asleep. They moved through the darkened hallways, whispering instructions, occasionally stifling laughter. Installing the motion sensor lights felt subversive but joyful, as though they were bestowing a secret blessing on Rosemore Gardens. Softly, they tested each strip, verifying that a passing step would trigger a gentle glow. By 3 in the morning, all floors were lined with fairy lights along the baseboards and near the ceilings. The silent team dispersed, hearts pounding with anticipation. They wondered if Karen would tear everything down, or if the board would force them to remove their work. Yet for now, the building had been transformed. The next evening, residents discovered the softly twinkling miracle. Each footstep triggered a wash of light that glowed for a few seconds before fading. Children ran around giggling in delight. Elderly neighbors smiled at the gentleness compared to the harsh overhead lamps, and parents praised the additional safety at night. Everywhere Olivia went, she saw neighbors enthralled by the simple enchantment of the lights. At dawn, Karen marched out of her apartment, scowl deepening with every motion-activated flicker lighting her way. By the time she reached the lobby, her lips were pursed so tightly they formed a thin line. She posted a stern notice on the board. Notice to all residents. The recent installation of unauthorized lighting fixtures is in direct violation of Rosemore Gardens bylaws. Please remove them at once, or fines may be assessed. HOA Vice President B. Arnett. But rather than prompting compliance, Karen's notice inspired open defiance. Neighbors openly questioned which specific bylaw applied. After all, the lights were not permanent, caused no damage, and had already garnered widespread support. Harriet and VJ stepped in, explaining to residents that Karen had acted without consulting the rest of the board. More importantly, Harriet mentioned that the board was still reviewing the matter, hinting that they might actually approve the lights. Karen seethed, realizing her usual intimidation tactics were failing. In the coming days, Karen escalated. She began removing batteries from the lights, but neighbors promptly replaced them. She tore a few strands off the wall, only to have them reinstalled by morning. Fed up, Harriet and VJ fast-tracked the building's plan to install new security cameras in public areas. Karen was too angry to realize that she was being watched. A week later, multiple cameras caught her in the act of ripping down strings of fairy lights on the 3rd floor. Once again, shards lay strewn across the carpet. This time, however, there was undeniable proof. Harriet called an emergency HOA meeting in the lounge, and practically half the building showed up. Karen, trying to maintain her usual poise, took a seat at one end of the table, arms crossed. Harriet displayed the printed still photos from the security footage, showing Karen's destruction of the lights. Murmurs of shock and disapproval rippled through the crowd. In light of this evidence, Harriet began, keeping her tone even, we, the undersigned board members, must address the actions of our vice president, Ms. Arnett. Vandalism of any kind is unacceptable, especially by a representative of our community. Karen tried to protest, citing bylaws about uniform aesthetics, but VJ interjected. None of those bylaws allow you to destroy property. We were conducting a review to see if these lights should be permanently approved. Now we must also review your conduct. After a brief discussion, the board voted to strip Karen of her vice presidential duties and suspend her from the board altogether, pending a formal review. Applause broke out among the residents. Some parents exchanged embraces, relieved that the main obstacle to their children's comfort and the building's newfound magic had been neutralized. Harriet, though stern, extended an olive branch. She offered Karen a place on a newly formed neighborhood aesthetics subcommittee, a role with far less power, but still a chance for Karen to be involved. Karen, her face pale and her hands trembling, muttered something indistinct, then stood and marched out, ignoring the eyes that followed her. Over the following weeks, The remaining board members unanimously approved a 6-month trial period for the motion sensor fairy lights. Residents volunteered to maintain them, ensuring batteries were replaced regularly and that no corridors fell into darkness. The communal spirit soared. Late one evening, Olivia found a small, folded note slipped under her door. In neat handwriting, it read, "I'm sorry. B. Arnett." Though lacking warmth, it was the closest Karen had come to admitting wrongdoing. As autumn descended, Rosemore Gardens felt more like a neighborhood than ever before. People began adding personal touches to their doorways, tasteful wreaths, small bouquets of seasonal flowers, or whimsical signs. Under Harriet and VJ's leadership, the HOA guidelines evolved to allow limited decorations, so long as they didn't impede safety. It was a refreshing change from Karen's ironclad rule. For Olivia and Daniel, life improved immeasurably. Thomas, feeling safer in the building's softly lit hallways, experienced fewer sensory meltdowns. Neighbors greeted them with genuine warmth, and impromptu gatherings formed in the lobby, often featuring hot cocoa or potluck snacks. The flickering fairy lights became part of the building's identity, a gentle reminder that kindness and empathy could triumph over pettiness. In December, Harriet suggested placing a small holiday tree in the lobby, a tradition the building had abandoned under Karen's strict regime. The tree was decorated with twinkling lights that matched the soft glow of the hallways. Children cheered, and older residents reminisced about how they used to gather around a lobby tree for carols. For the first time in years, the entire building resonated with a holiday spirit. Karen hovered on the periphery of these events, still maintaining a certain aloofness. Yet on one frosty evening, Harriet nudged her to place the final ornament, the star, on top of the tree. Karen complied, and although her face remained guarded, a flicker of what might have been acceptance crossed her features. Standing across the lobby, Daniel whispered to Olivia, "Who would have imagined we'd end up here, with Karen placing a star on the tree?" Olivia smiled, Thomas clutching her hand as he stared in wonder at the lights. "I'm just glad we found a way to keep Thomas safe and happy, and that the building feels more like a real community now." When the 6-month trial period concluded, the HOA board convened for a final vote on whether the fairy lights should become a permanent fixture. To little surprise, the board unanimously approved them. Karen abstained, but she did not object aloud. It was a small but significant sign of changing tides. Under Harriet's direction, the building updated its official guidelines. Battery-operated, motion sensor lights were permissible in hallways, so long as they were safely and securely installed. Residents who once stifled their creativity now breathed easier. Late-night walks became almost magical, each step triggering a soft glow that momentarily cast the corridor in a pastel haze. Visitors often complimented Rosemore Gardens, describing the environment as welcoming and whimsical. Prospective buyers and renters noticed the unusual warmth among the neighbors, an intangible quality that transcended tidy lawns and pristine bricks. For Olivia and Daniel, the victory was more than just a matter of principle. It was about ensuring Thomas's well-being. They saw him grow more confident as he toddled around the hallways without distress. Other parents who had similarly sensitive children praised the building's inclusive stance, sharing advice and forming deeper friendships. Karen, meanwhile, served on her subcommittee, occasionally offering rigid suggestions about color palettes and layout. Though her stern manner persisted, she no longer wielded the same unchecked power. Under the community's collective watch, the destructive impulses that once drove her had been curbed. As time passed, the story of Karen smashing one small strand of lights faded into near-mythical status for future residents. New families heard only whispers of the HOA Karen drama, then looked around, puzzled, at the soft, soothing lights that framed every corridor. But for those who had lived through it, each shimmering strand served as a reminder of a community's triumph over petty rule enforcement. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the corridors came alive with motion-activated light. Children laughed, neighbors shared casual greetings, and an older resident might pause in the hallway to admire the glow. In these moments, Rosemore Gardens felt like more than just a building. It felt like a testament to what neighbors could accomplish when they united in empathy and refused to bow to intimidation. And so it was that the gentle glow of fairy lights, once threatened by an act of spite, became the beloved symbol of a neighborhood spirit. While no place is perfect, Rosemore Gardens had discovered how even a single strand of light could illuminate not just the halls, but the hearts of everyone who called it home.